just because people don't choose to come to our Sunday worship services, but even when we host things like concerts. Remember Marty Miller, or the Olivet College Gospel Choir, or the Toby Jones Trio. Yes, our own church-going members will attend that concert, faithfully do so. But people from the general public do not come. Non-members tend to avoid coming into a church. You know, it wasn't that way when I was a kid. But today's norm, unchurched people are not looking for us, no matter how fantastic our Sunday morning worship seems to be in our eyes. Unless you ask somebody to come with you, they're not here. Unless you ask someone to come with you, they are not here. Now, I agree it's certainly easier to stay with our old habit of providing quality programs for our current members, and also to be welcoming of those people who, for their own personal reasons, choose to come through these doors, choose for their reasons to sit in these pews alongside. And I say good for them, and it's good for us. Okay, I'm in favor of that. It is how we have gained the members that we have gained. That's how we've done it for 157 years, and it may or may not be effective. You know, the Alpena News ran a whole series of front-page articles about diversity last week. Remember all those? It was interesting. One headline struck me. It says, Alpena is slow to change. And I thought, like, duh. How is that news? Change don't come easy to a lot of folks. In William Easum's book, Dancing with Dinosaurs, which is his metaphor for the institutional church, as largely being out of touch, too big, somewhat archaic, highly bureaucratic, and mostly irrelevant organization. He quotes Leif Anderson, who says, "Adversity is often the window of opportunity for change. Few people want to change when there is prosperity for them and peace. Major changes are often precipitated by urgent necessity," unquote. Urgent necessity. Unless you and I and a significant number of our 150 members feel the necessity to change, feel the urgency to grow, we will stay on our plateau. We will dance with the dinosaurs. William Easum writes, there are many church leaders who are so consumed by the threats of decline and the issue of survival that they are paralyzed to seek opportunities that are taking shape. Some insist on clinging to the ways of the past. Others yearn to recreate their memories of the past, make our church great again. Most refuse to admit that the world they grew up in no longer exists. However, he continues, many congregations have their share of people who are ready and able to give leadership, who are willing to concentrate on the opportunities rather than the threats. They have a holy discontent with the way things are. These are the ones who know that if people are allowed to get too comfortable with the present, they will learn to live in the past, unquote. Well, William Easum proposes 3 questions that we ought to ask ourselves. First, what are the things that congregations do today that no longer make sense? Why do we insist on doing them? What would be the implication if we stopped doing them? Is it possible to redirect them in some more relevant or redemptive ministries? I refer to that process as putting up a red light for stop, a yellow light for caution, because maybe it's working, but maybe it's got to go. Look at it closer. And green light, go with it. It's still alive and well and focused. The second question, he says, we must ask ourselves, what can we make possible today in our ministry, which will make our congregation more vital and relevant tomorrow? My faith in God, our Creator, and Jesus, our Redeemer, and the Holy Spirit that empowers us and sustains us tells me that most people think things are impossible are actually possible. Our choir at every rehearsal starts by singing high hopes, those high apple pie in the sky hopes. The ant that wants to move that rubber tree plant, but it can't because it's an ant. But if you keep at it long enough, oops, there goes another rubber tree plant. You know the song. What can we make possible today which might make First Congregational more vital and more relevant tomorrow? Let's get out our binoculars. Field glasses for hunters, right? Binoculars. And long-range view. Where do we want to be? And third question. Since we live predominantly in a secular society with political values that are largely non-Christian, and that's true for both sides of the current polarized partisan divide, and we live in an economy that rewards wealthy while disenfranchising people who do not have sufficient money, we have to ask ourselves, what is Christian and non-Christian in a world like ours? To wrestle with the definition of what it means to be Christian will be the topic at our next LARC meeting this coming Wednesday over at St. Paul Lutheran Church. So in preparing for that conversation, as well as preparing for today's sermon, I went to Douglas Johnson's classic book, Reaching Out to the Unchurched. It was hot off the press when I bought it and read it at seminary back in 1983. He writes, "The church exists because Christ went from the temple into the lives of people. The Bible tells stories of his walking out among the outcasts, being concerned about the prostitutes, preaching to the masses out in the open air, touching lepers, eating with the hated tax collectors and the despised sinners. It wasn't easy for Jesus to do those things then, even as it isn't easy for us to do them now. Our church, if it is to follow his example, will reach out to the non-believers. Reach out to the disenfranchised, disenchanted, the skeptical, those who ridicule us and who belittle us. The church will reach out. It's certainly easier to believe the church ought not to try to attract these kinds of people. That we ought to work only with those who show some interest in us, those who come through the doors to us. Those are our kind of people because they're choosing us. Douglas Johnson writes, and I quote, "Our task is much greater. We have to go out to the non-believers, to the skeptics, to those who badmouth the church. We have to go out and hear what they have to say. We have to listen to them, and that is much harder than talking to them. We have to hear what they say in their own language, not in our language. And then we have to tell them what we think the church is about and what it can do with them and what it can do for them as it has done for us." Unquote. That's not easy to do. If we're not used to telling our stories of faith, if we're not used to speaking about God. But I think he's right. The church lives as it moves beyond itself out of these concrete walls and stained glass windows into the lives of the people in our community. We do that in some ways financially. We do that in some ways by being active on the Habitat for Humanity board or working with a hospice or working with the mentally ill. We do it. We go out in our careers and in our days and do that. But that is the church alive, not inside the box. That's a challenge. But I think they're right. The church lives by moving outside of its comfort zone, outside of its walls, into the lives of the people in our community. That's our mission. That's our goal. May God help us. Amen.